Welcome to Giant Mess. I'm your host, the real cinch Neal Lynch. On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing, recapping, reacting to, and breaking down The Running Man. Edgar Wright's The Running Man, starring Glen Powell. So without further ado, let's get started up in here. Edgar Wright's The Running Man, the super intense satirical take on Stephen King's 1982 novel, written as Richard Bachman. And it's a huge departure from the cheesy 1987 Arnold Schwarzenegger classic. Wright wanted to bring back the novel's dark socioeconomic critique, focusing on Ben Richards, a desperate guy who's pre-tubercular and needs cash for his sick daughter's needs and meds. The 2025 film, which stars Glen Powell as the hot-headed Richards, is more about systemic horror than big action set pieces. It skips the 1987 version's over-the-top stalkers, which I disagreed with, and game show vibes, which were partly lifted from the French film Le Prix de Danger. We got Evan McCone as a professional masked hunter with some interesting twists and reveals and all kinds of good stuff with Evan McCone that we'll get into. Josh Brolin plays Dan Killian, who's a corporate producer who only cares about ratings, an example of the quote-unquote banality of evil. Banality of evil is a concept from Hannah Arendt's 1963 book Eichmann in Jerusalem, suggesting that major atrocities often result from ordinary bureaucratic obedience rather than inherent monstrousness. Ooh, the banality of evil. Freaking love that, dude. There's a major difference in the ending between Running Man 2025 and Running Man 87 and Running Man the novel. Basically, the ending from the novel has been the talk of the town. The consensus amongst most film producers, developers, studios is that you can't film the ending as it is in the book. Like if you were just to be faithful to that ending in the book, you'd probably get some pretty serious backlash from a large swath of the country. So we'll get into that as well. But the movie's world brilliantly pokes fun at modern media with shows like The Americanos, which is a Kardashians parody, and even throws in some controversial product placement with all those call-out shout-outs to Liquid Death. Despite its $110 million budget, the film bombed at the box office, only making about $69 million. Nice. But later became a massive streaming redemption hit on platforms like Apple TV, ironically proving its own point about media consumption. So this here episode is going to be an in-depth analysis of the 2025 film Adaptation, directed by Edgar Wright. We'll dive into the production, the narratives, the themes. We'll have some comparisons. Even though comparison is the thief of joy, I'm about to steal your joy. We're going to compare it to Stephen King's 1982 novel and the 1987 film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. We'll look at the socio-political satire, a little bit of legal history. There were some plagiarism lawsuits, as we kind of briefly hinted at in the intro. There is also industrial context. What is the performance at the box office and then the weak performance at the box office? What? And the strong performance on streaming. What does that mean for the future of theatrical releases or mid-budget theatrical releases? We'll dissect the different endings, and you'll come to understand why the novel's ending is unfilmable. Although, my God, the person that has the balls to do that, we might not see it for a while, but could have been the move. We'll look at the dissection of character motivations and the satirical targets. So we'll start with the Stephen King Renaissance of 2025. The Running Man's November 2025 release contributed to a resurgence of grittier Stephen King adaptations when he was writing under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. So his Bachman adaptations include Francis Lawrence's The Long Walk, and the films have sparked conversations about state-sanctioned death games. I have not watched The Long Walk yet. So The Long Walk has a somber tone. Edgar Wright's The Running Man tried to balance the source material's nihilism with his kinetic stylized visuals, which is extremely ambitious, and I applaud him for trying to tackle this and being able to both cater to and appease to the fans of the 87 OG Running Man adaptation with Schwarzenegger, but also, paying homage and keeping as faithful to the novel as possible. That's a huge balancing act because they're both like, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of Schwarzenegger's was glitz, glamour, 80s, spandex, just, neon and glamorous and all that. And then the novel, which I have not read, but is extremely dark and grim and dystopian, like mega dystopian. The film, the 2025 film, Edgar Wright's film, was polarizing and divided audiences who, you were either in that Schwarzenegger camp where you're like, you wanted more of that camp on camp on camp. You were in the camp, kind of like the gang, Bang Bang Bird Gang. Or you were a huge fan of the novel who was really pissed off by the 87 adaptation. And this attempted, it's almost like the saying that comes to mind, it's not incredibly applicable, but if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for nothing, or I don't know. It's like when you try to cater to both of those crowds by meeting in the middle ground, does that work? And given the task at hand, where it's like, I'm sure Wright was not a fan of the 87 flick with Schwarzenegger. He was more in tune with the novel and probably wanted to do a more faithful adaptation of that. And he probably got some notes like, hey, people, it's a cult classic, the 87 Running Man. I had never read the book. I watched that movie, and I could watch that movie. You could put it on anytime, any day, and I'll watch it start to finish. I love Richard Dawson as the game show host. Damon Killian. I love the stalkers instead of the hunters. I like how it's just out there and different and unique in certain respects. It still follows a formula, obviously, but so, and this is the other thing with adaptations of Schwarzenegger films. I've been, for the most part, fairly anti-adaptation of Schwarzenegger films. Like Total Recall didn't need a remake. RoboCop didn't need a remake, although RoboCop was not a Schwarzenegger film. My B. But Total Recall was one where it's like, we don't need a remake of that. You can't top that. You can't top it. Running Man was different, though. I looked at something like Running Man, and when I first heard they were going to do a remake or a reboot or another version of it, I was like, okay. It feels like there's some room there to grow or to branch out or develop and flesh it out more, because the 87 release with Schwarzenegger was felt super contained. And when the angle here was more in tune with the novel, in which, he's not just running on a game show set or in a like LA, he's like traveling the globe. He's a globetrotter, Harlem style, tricks and whatnot, throwing buckets of confetti on the audience. That was more appealing to me. It was like, wow, we're scaling it. It felt like, okay, it's contained in Running Man 87, but we're going to scale it, and it's going to be worldwide or global. Has that kind of, that feeling, like the ending of John Wick 2. I bring this up all the time, but it was either 2 or 3. I think it was 2, where all of a sudden the hit is put out, the APB is put out to all the assassins in the world, like, kill John Wick and you'll get an astronomical, life-changing amount of money. And so all the assassins in the world, that's when you start to, that's the tipping point. You realize, whoa, there are a ton of assassins in the world that we just don't know about. And seeing them all start to converge on Wick, and Wick's like, he just starts running. He's just like, how the hell am I going to pull out of this? That's the sense that I got for this Running Man. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's different from what we saw in the first, and in my eyes, it makes it better. Now, where did they make it worse? I'm fine with them not calling them stalkers and calling them hunters, but the hunters that they used, they only gave one that had personality, or that had flair, or that had any kind of gravitas. The main hunter, Evan McCone, like I mentioned, is very intriguing, mysterious. He's masked, so you're like, who is that? And man, my mind went racing, and I was like, oh my god, they're setting this up for what could be a pretty awesome reveal. No shade or knock to the actor that played Evan McCone at all, because I love him. But it was setting it up for something bigger. But you built it up to be like, this is going to be like an unbelievable cameo. And I am a sucker for that shit. I am a sucker for, uncredited, unlisted actors or actresses. Matt Damon in Interstellar. Matt Damon in Thor. It's Matt Damon in Eurotrip. Like, it's just, I love that. That's what I love so much about Matt Damon, is that he understands the punch that he can provide when it comes out of nowhere, when it comes out of left field. And I feel like they should have taken that route with Evan McCone, and they didn't, and the movie suffered for it. And again, no disrespect to the actor that played Evan McCone, because I do love him a lot. I just don't think he has that same kind of wow factor that you would get if I had someone else in mind. And I can expand the list on the fly here, but there was one person I had in mind, and I thought it was going to be him, and it wasn't. The fact that they did not give the other hunters any kind of personality. Maybe one other hunter, the dude with the bleach blonde hair. I don't even remember his name. That's how forgetful the other hunters were, and I just don't agree with that approach. I think that I'm sure the people who are hardcore purist novel fans of the novel, were like, what the fuck is this stalker bullshit with like Sub-Zero and Fireball and like Dynamo? Like, what is this? And I'm like, and this is partly my demo and my age. When I first saw the movie, I was like, I was a kid. It came out in 87. I probably watched it in the 90s when it made its way to cable and whatnot. But I loved the big, boisterous, colorful, flashy stalkers. That really appealed to me. And I know that some people are like, oh my God, it really takes the wind out of the sails, or it really lessens the stakes. It diminishes the stakes, because then they turn comical, and it's like, is this a comedy? Is this an action movie? Is this a horror movie? What is this? Because I guess maybe tonally it doesn't align, but it's a game show, and I thought that was a major oversight on Edgar Wright's part. But getting back to the novel, the Richard Bachman novel. So Stephen King's works as Richard Bachman, his pseudonym, are characterized by vicious cynicism and a lack of supernatural safety valves, like you would see in, excuse me, It, perchance, The Mist, Christine, Cujo. It's not The Shining. It's more, more grounded, more human, systemic, and economic horror, which is interesting. And I think that you might see more adaptations from that era, because there might be, the superhero fatigue. Is there supernatural fatigue? I don't know. Protagonist Ben Richards in the novel isn't an action hero, but a physically ravaged 28-year-old scrawny pre-tubercular man in dystopian America. He volunteers for the Games Network solely out of desperation. He needs money for medicine for his dying 18-month-old daughter, Kathleen, who has a curable influenza, which it ain't no thing but a chicken wing to the rich, but it is a pretty much a death sentence for the poor. The 2025 film aims to restore this foundational desperation, which was abandoned in the 87 film, and Richards volunteers because he has no alternative. Network executives view Richards as a dangerous, intelligent threat, see his public execution on the running man as a way to dispose of him while generating ad revenue. So if you've seen the movie, you've read the novel, you know where the divergence is, or lies, towards the end there. As we mentioned, the novel's climax involves protagonist Ben Richards, after discovering the network has, in fact, murdered his family, hijacks a plane and flies it into the Games Network skyscraper. So, yeah. The ending is the most critical and debated part of the book, described as a literal kamikaze flight, and an act of obliteration and nihilistic void that destroys the hero, villain, and the symbol of oppression in a scream of rage. Hollywood historically considered the ending unfilmable, literally initially for being too dark, and later because of the unsettling resemblance to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The core dilemma for any adaptation is whether The Running Man can retain its anti-establishment spirit without this original controversial conclusion. And, with the film, that's what drew me to the Ben Richards character because, you watch the 87 version with Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger, the Ben Richards version played by Schwarzenegger is not this down and out, impoverished guy who's pre-tubercular and scrawny. He's a beefy ex-cop who was framed for the massacre at Bakersfield. I think it's Bakersfield, where there's like tons of crowds rioting in the streets, or the higher ups think that they're rioting or that they're a danger to riot, a threat to riot. And Ben Richards is like, no, this is a peaceful protest. They're not hurting anybody. I'm not going to shoot on innocent civilians. And so then that's where, I think that was my first exposure to deep fakes, where it's like, wow, I hope this never comes to fruition, where we can just digitally alter any kind of footage to make it look like you done wrong and can frame you for a crime. Like, that sucks. And it's like, here we are. The deep fake age is here. So even as I'm talking to you, it's reminiscent of what ends up happening in the Running Man film, where it's like, I could be talking to you about something that the state, quote unquote, the government, the intelligence agencies, anyone doesn't want you to hear or see, and they can just take the footage, alter it to make it look like I'm, praising some radical extremism, and terrorism. So, scary times for sure. But I was drawn to, so Schwarzenegger plays Ben Richards where he doesn't have that rage, right? It's not like he's nihilist and he just wants to burn it all to the ground. He doesn't have like anger issues. He really is just, as we're going to point out, a stoic warrior, like just steely gaze, and so I would, even though I love Schwarzenegger and I I can't help but love his performance in The Running Man 87, when they introduced Glen Powell's character and they kind of they had not subtle, but the scenes in which they highlight his anger in the beginning of the film, the first act of the film, heading into the second act, I was like, yes. We just don't see a lot of protagonists these days with anger issues, although you do see it with, I guess you could say it with the Hulk in the MCU, and then I just watched Wonder Man, and he has some anger issues and rage issues and self-control problems, and I relate to that, I have my own issues with that, so I related to that version of Ben Richards, where it's like, it's an angry dude, and he's, all he doesn't care about much, but he cares about his family. And I feel like that transition or that arc where, Ben Richards basically lost that anger and lost that edge. And I don't know that they didn't explain it in a way, like it wasn't explicit how they guided the audience to understand that arc, if that makes any sense. Like, he just went from rage to, like, the rage kind of was all over the place after that. And I felt like that it's man versus self, right? It's man versus man, right? It's Ben Richards versus Evan McCone, Dan Killian. It is Richards versus himself. It's Richard versus the elements in terms of like the public, right? So maybe is Glen Powell the guy then? Or should you have gone with someone who, I feel like when Glen Powell, there were a few moments where Glen Powell put his rage on center stage. And did it connect and did it make an impact and did I believe it? It was like there were some times where I was like, fuck yeah. And I wanted more of that specific portrayal of rage or depiction of rage. And instead it felt like as we get into act 2 in the final act, it was like, I think it's still there, but like, is it because he's learned, and what has he learned that made him like, there wasn't that line or scene that clicked for me where it was like, okay, this is where he internally makes the decision to not have rage or not have anger. But then again, the way the movie ends, it's like, that's pretty that's pretty angry, dude. And I love that, and I love the end. Well, love is a strong word. Let's back that up. I liked the end. So I guess you call it the epilogue, where it's not the climax of the film. The first climax, there's like, multiple climaxes, ladies, in this movie. So there's the first climax with the plane, and then there's the second climax after that. And I liked the second climax more because everything related to the plane and leading up to the plane, that's where it lost me. It was like that's when we got into that situation where he pulls over the woman in the car as the hostage, and then there's kind of like this weird explanation of like why he's being kept alive after so many attempts on his life. It didn't it didn't match up for me. It was just like, I'm losing belief here. Like, I didn't believe that he is the face of this movement, that he started this movement. I just, for whatever reason, didn't believe that, and they were pushing on that hard, but maybe it didn't feel earned. I guess that's it. It's like, how do you translate that? Like, I understand the goal here, right? You want him to go from he is nihilist and doesn't care about anything except his family to, okay, now I have to look outside myself, and now I've become a symbol of something that's greater and bigger than myself, and I now have the masses in my corner. But like, how did he get the masses in his corner? There were just little beats that maybe they could have added to help with that transition from, he's a nobody with anger issues to all of a sudden he's the face of a movement, of the revolution. Like, that transition and arc is a bit muddied. So I would have liked to see something that more of a slow burn, as opposed to like all of a sudden, after what we see Richards Lives graffiti, and it's like we see the I don't know. I think they attempted to do that with the Apostle, or whoever the dude was who puts together those those videos, which I didn't know what to think about those videos. He's like, that's basically what I'm doing, except not as I don't have the kind of editing capabilities that he does, or editing skills that he does. So that's the novel, the 87 Deviation. The Schwarzenegger Factor. So the 87 film adaptation, The Running Man, directed by Paul Michael Glaser, adapted King's novel to fit Arnold Schwarzenegger's star persona, fundamentally altering the source material. So obviously, when you cast Schwarzenegger, you've gone atypical to what the character should be, right? He's not scrawny. He's not pre-tubercular. He's not a victim of poverty and starvation. Stephen King noted the movies. Schwarzenegger as Richards was a framed, physically dominant police pilot, was as far away from the character in the book as you can get. Now, two things here. One, the whole framed cop pilot device or backstory is, and the motivation for the character in the 87 film, it does, Wright briefly touches upon it in the 2025 movie. It's essentially when Glen Powell goes to meet Michael Cera's character in Maine. And, Michael Cera is living with his mom, and he has like, his house is basically a booby trap extravaganza. Like, it's Home Alone on steroids is the note that I took. But there's that whole setup and payoff of like, just don't ask, when Ben Richards, Glen Powell, is talking to the I guess it's the Apostle. Is that the Apostle or not? The black dude, big bro, wish I had his name. That he's like, just don't mention the hot dog cart. And so, Glen Powell can't help himself when he's talking to Michael Cera in the secret room that hey, what's up with the hot dog cart? And then we get that that emotional monologue, dramatic monologue comes off as pretty funny from Michael Cera, which I thought was a great casting choice. And we find out that Michael Cera's character's dad was a cop who was anti whatever the hell the Games Network was having them do, and decided to resign and become a hot dog vendor. And then he ends up getting murdered by the cops that he thought were his friends who remained on the force. So that's tangentially connecting. Like, was that in the original novel? Probably, but if not, that's a great decision by Wright to kind of pay ode to the Schwarzenegger character, in a sense. And I guess you could say the same about McCone as well. And McCone. The other part of this is like, well, if you're gonna say, and this is where Wright tries to please both crowds, because, and this is where I don't know if this is the right choice, and I'm sure I'll get some pushback on this, but Glen Powell is yoked. Glen Powell is shredded, and not like lean, I'm starving because I'm poor, shredded. He is vascular as fuck, just juicy, beefy, but shredded. So muscular. I don't know, and I like the scene where he's in the YMCA, essentially the YMCA, where the veterans are allowed to stay. It's run down. It's just decrepit. It's pretty gnarly, nasty place. He goes to take a shower, and so he disrobes, unclothes himself, takes off his clothes, and it's like, you got to be kidding me. I'm supposed to believe that this dude is poor. That's as healthy. Like, in my eyes, that's the definition of health. Like, the guy looks healthy as fuck, just like big muscles, no fat. And I guess I'm sure you can have some bodybuilders chime in here and be like, well, you don't have to be rich or wealthy to be a bodybuilder. You just need XYZ. And it's literally, you have to cut out everything else in your life. So there is an avenue or route to that, but it doesn't, like, to the lay folk who don't understand how to build a body like me, I think the initial thought is, this guy's poor. Look at him. He's jacked. He's swole. He's this. He's that. He probably has a physical trainer, and he probably has a routine and like all these supplements. And you can't get to that body. In my head, I say to myself, you can't get to that body if you're impoverished and starving. But that's where I thought like that misses the mark. It's like, you probably could have had a version of Glen Powell, because Glen Powell has shown his versatility, in terms of, you look at the movie Hitman, which we've talked about a lot. And I think Edgar Wright saw Hitman and was like, oh, we can do this with Glen Powell, where he's, dressing up in disguises and whatnot. I thought they would lean into that a little bit more, because that was what was so awesome about Hitman, is seeing Glen Powell's acting chops come through and being, such wildly different characters from scene to scene. They, again, it feels like they didn't necessarily lean into that too hard for Running Man. It was like, we're going to have you be a businessman. We're going to dress you up like a businessman, and you're going to look like Ben Richards or Glen Powell wearing a fake mustache. Like, what the fuck are we doing here, guys? Are you serious? But like, when he plays the blind priest, I'm like, yes, dude, this is what it should be. This is what every disguise and dress up should be. They kind of did it with the veteran angle when he played the like down and out veteran. They do it with the blind priest, but they lead with this businessman thing shtick, and I'm like, I mean, they're, and I guess that's to raise the stakes, to be like, oh, he's fucked. They want the audience to be like, oh, he's done. Like, if it's that clear, like, there's a shot where, he's in the, I want to say, train station, and they have him. He's closer to the camera, front of frame, And and it's a cool shot for sure. In the background, like over his shoulder, they have the visual display and screen where it's like every screen that you look at has this APB announcement where it's like Ben Richards, the running man, is now out in the, and like he turns his head in front of frame as the visual display, the Ben Richards in the visual display turns his head and it's like synchronized. I thought that was super cool. But it also served to me to be like, wow, like he looks almost identical to what's in that visual display. To me, I think it would have made a greater impact. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to figure out what they were going for, because like it's a cool shot to see the synchronized heads turning, or it's him turning in real life and that's him turning on the screen. I thought that was really cool, but to me it only reinforced the idea. Oh, he's fucked, because he looks exactly like he does in the visual screen, the screen display. He's just wearing a fake mustache, which ends up falling off anyway. It's just like that's what you let off with. So that was a big disconnect where I was like, this is not going to work. And maybe that's the point, is like he wants to tip the audience that like he doesn't know what he's doing. But the guy, you know, William H. Macy, his character, and him giving the costumes, like, you didn't put a little more thought. Like, you gave him a really great veteran, a really great blind priest, and then you gave him like just a businessman. And I assume the idea there is like, oh, well, we're going to go the American Psycho route. And we're going to basically say that any white guy in a suit, they all look the same. And that he's going to blend into the crowd. Because I believe William H. Macy's character ends up saying that he's like, you know, the mistake that a lot of contestants on the Running Man make are, you know, trying to run to someplace distant or rural and get away from everything and everyone, whereas you should try and blend in. So I don't know. That was a long way to get to what they ended up settling on. I disagree with it. I think there's a better way to blend in than just slapping a suit and a fake mustache on him. So the tone shift in the 87 film adaptation, the novel's grim noir was replaced with a neon pro wrestling aesthetic, which I love because I love pro wrestling. And the book's anonymous hunters became theatrical stalkers with gimmicks like Fireball, Sub-Zero, and Dynamo. Yeah, I have no problem with hunters being anonymous. I just think you could have made them look a lot more badass and cool. Like McCone, it's not like that was glitz, glamour, pro wrestling, at least not 80s pro wrestling gimmick. Why couldn't you do that with the others? Instead, you just had the one bleach blonde hair guy, and then you have a bunch of others that like interchangeable. And like, were they super anonymous? No. So it's like, why does McCone get the mask and the other ones are not anonymous? I don't know. Again, it feels like Wright trying to split down the middle and missing. The 87 film ends with a Hollywood triumph while Rich just defeats the stalkers, exposes the network's lies, and kills host Damon Killian in that, where he puts him in the whatever that friggin' transport vehicle thing is. I forget what it's called, but just shoots him. I thought that was, I like shit like that. There was a plagiarism lawsuit that I hit on in the intro. The 87 version of Running Man faced a plagiarism lawsuit because, despite its credit to the Bachman book, heavily borrowed from other televised manhunt narratives. Notably, the film echoed elements such as the game show host and urban pursuit satire from French director Yves Bosset's 1983 film Le Prix du Danger. Le Prix du Danger, based on a 1958 Sheckley story. So there's a lot of based-ons going on here. It's like eventually you adapt it so much that it's like, does everyone get a little slice of the pie? Boisset sued the producers and eventually won after a decade-long legal battle. The court ruled the 1987 film plagiarized elements from Boisset's work that were absent in King's novel, specifically the campy game show aspects. The 2025 film adheres close to the original book, it moves away from the plagiarized elements, but though it retains the core game show satire. So, I don't know if Boisset has another case to be made here. Like, did you invent TV Manhunt? Did ya? This was an interesting tidbit, little piece of trivia that I wonder how things would be differently if this actually happened. But the '87 film was initially developed with Christopher Reeve in mind to play Ben Richards. The original concept aimed for a grittier, faithful adaptation of the Bachman book, where, you know, and Christopher Reeve was seeking to avoid typecasting after Superman. So he would have played the lead as an everyman, which you saw Christopher Reeve's chops in Superman, where he can play the shy, meek Clark Kent and then transform into the leading man, strong Superman character. So, yeah, that would have been super interesting. Reeve left the project when it shifted to an action spectacle tailored for Schwarzenegger. This early Christopher Reeve version might have resembled the 2025 Glen Powell adaptation. So would we have gotten an updated version if Reeve had starred in the '87 film and it was closer to the novel? Who's to say? I also don't know. Like, Schwarzenegger was coming off a pretty awesome run where he had the 2 Conan movies, Barbarian and Destroyer. He had The Terminator, Commando, and Predator. I mean, that's just like a murderer's row of movies that I could rewatch from here to Kingdom Come, dude. Like, I love all those movies. And so the studio probably wants to ride the hot hand, knowing that, well, the budget isn't great. And so we're just going to dedicate most of the budget to Schwarzenegger, understanding his star power, his ability to draw box office. And we'll just have to scale back a lot of the stuff that you see in the novel that would probably add to the budget. So hence the contained set, game show set, as opposed to this is a global manhunt. And in the movie too, it didn't turn into a global manhunt. It turned into like a 3-city tour in America. So the scale, it's like I was promised scale, and I kind of got it, but it was still very like we're still sticking to one region. So the development, casting, and adaptation for the 2025 adaptation. So director Edgar Wright has long sought to adapt the Running Man novel, having been a fan of the novel since age 13. He felt that the '87 film missed the book's prescience and gritty tone. His adaptation explicitly aimed to return to the source material, and the goal was to capture the novel's Bachman voice of anger and social critique, which I think they mostly landed and nailed in the first act, as I mentioned, but then it got a little wonky in the second and third acts. So Wright's project was intended as a new adaptation, not a remake of the '87 film, and this distinction was signaled by including author references such as a Bachman's building Easter egg in that where, he's going through, Ben Richards is walking through the dystopian city to give you a sense of the atmosphere and the environment that we're in, to do a little world building, world setting, set the tone. And yeah, so why cast Glen Powell, the modern everyman? We kind of touched on this. Powell is cast as Ben Richards to balance the book's scrawny character with blockbuster demands. Powell's known for Top Gun Maverick, or that's where, people became a little bit more aware of him. Although, I think it's Set It Up was the first movie that I took notice of him. It's a rom-com, pretty good rom-com. So Set It Up, I think, was initially him. And then I didn't even realize, I didn't put a name to the face until much later on. So Top Gun Maverick was really kind of, I guess, is where he kind of crossed the threshold into more almost A-list type area. And then you had Anyone But You with Sydney Sweeney, which I was not going to watch. And then I was like, all right, let's give it a whirl. And I thought he was great in that. And then Hitman, of course, was awesome. So he can bring star power while playing vulnerable. He consulted Tom Cruise, his Top Gun Maverick co-star, and an expert on cinematic running. Cruise gave a 2-hour masterclass on running in movies, advising Powell to film himself running to correct his form, emphasizing that the running must convey panic and desperation. Now, was Glen Powell's running necessarily did Did it convey that? Yeah. I just there were too many. There was at least one scene where he's running to catch the train, maybe, and I was like, that just does not look right. That looks like a big muscular man trying to run, and like, I mean, Tom Cruise. We've gone over this, the king of running in movies, and it just didn't look right with Glen Powell. It just didn't look right with Glen Powell. And I don't know that I necessarily got panic or desperation. I got like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to run. And again, I keep saying that and I keep critiquing it, and I'm so harsh with that, but like, I cannot run now. I didn't even when I was healthy and fully 100% intact pre all the ACL tears. I couldn't run. So who the F am I to be throwing stones? But you watch it and you're just like, he looks like he's I don't know. I don't know what he looks like. It's just like, oh boy. It's kind of like when you are on a football team, like a football team, I think is a good analogy, where it's like, oh, this is a big dude, and like, he just physically looks so dominant and superior, and then that person tries to do anything athletic, and you're like, oh, this is why you're Division 3. This is why, because the eyeball test, it's like, why aren't you in the NFL? Oh, that's why. Cruise also taught safe stunt work to ensure Powell remained bulletproof. And Powell plays Richards as a hot-headed malcontent driven by economic failure, departing from the Arnold Schwarzenegger archetype. Listen, I'm telling you. I mean, like the scenes where, when he's at the network and he's auditioning and trying out, and the scene where they're doing the like Rorschach test, but it's the holograms, right? So it's not physical ink on paper. It's more of a hologram Rorschach test. And you're supposed to say one word, and he's just like giving the angriest responses. I was like, fuck yes, this is exactly, I'm all in on this movie. I was like, okay, now we're launched, we've taken off, and I'm on the flight, and I'm here, ride or die. The scene where he's talking with Dan Killian after he goes through the tryouts and all the tests, the treadmills and the obstacle courses and the Rorschach test, you get to see that anger come out a little bit again when he's talking to Josh Brolin's Dan Killian. And I was like, yes. And then we just it felt real. And then when he had to send in the tapes and he was being angry, it did not feel as genuine and as authentic. There was like, and I imagine it's got to be tough for Powell, because like, it's not not really your traditional arc for protagonist to go from angry to not angry. But they tried to explain his physicality by saying that it's attributed to his background as a laborer. It's like, okay, I mean, yes, physical laborers are in better shape than someone who sits in a desk job, sedentary lifestyle. They're on their feet more, they're using their muscles more. I get it. So it's not impossible. I just felt like you just look at his body, just like, there's no way you're poor, dude. There's just no way. I mean, this has been an ongoing problem or issue, is that, the government wants you to be healthy. Great. They have all these guidelines. Great. You try to be healthy, it's going to cost you more for the most part. The majority of healthy products out there have a premium on them because they're healthy. And so when you're impoverished and poor, you don't have access to the stuff that can make you healthier because it's too rich. I mean, Jesus Christ, he can't afford medicine for the flu, which at this point, you can go to any convenience store and it's like, $3-5 to pick up whatever to combat the flu. In this future that Ben Richards lives in, like, only the rich can afford it. So like, he's going to be able to afford stuff to make his body, like, I don't know. I understand, I guess it just feels a bit flimsy, and I would have liked another, like a quick scene, some other layer that would indicate, okay, here's how this dude's getting this fucking jacked. But critics noted that Glen Powell captures the character's well-meaning fuck-up energy, which, yeah, he does exceptionally well, for sure. We've been there where it's like you can see they did a phenomenal job, I think, of setting up his character in terms of here's his history, here's his backstory. When he gets to the front of the line at the network and he's talking to the dude behind the counter, behind the screen, the glass partition, and the guy's just like rattling off his employment history, and I was just like, oh, I am Ben Richards. Like, I keep cycling through all kinds of jobs because I keep losing my jobs because I've taken this kind of harder stance, inflexible, rigid stance on bureaucracy and corporate culture and all that stuff. And Ben Richards is not one for, sacrificing his values for the greater good of the company or the organization. And so I was just like, okay, I can see myself in Ben Richards. And, do I have the physicality of Ben Richards? No. But, he's like, why is that triangle? Why is that triangle there? And the guy won't answer him, and he just punches the glass. I was just like, yes, I'm in. Let's do this. So the idea that you can see his intentions, Glen Powell's Ben Richards, his intentions are good, right? But he just is going about it the wrong way. And you can see, like, most people, at least, people who have a little more wisdom, a little bit longer in the tooth, would be like, that's not the move. If you want to be able to survive in this landscape, you can't go about it that way. But I appreciated that. That's character setup and backstory. So in the 2025 movie, Ben Richards' journey changes from cynicism and a personal quest to save his daughter to radicalization after surviving the game. He witnesses the network's cruelty, and that's the catalyst for his transformation. His private hand-to-heart signal to his wife, Sheila, is adopted by the public as a symbol of solidarity. Public support spawns the Richard Lives graffiti, and the narrative evolves from mere survival to a mythic one. Again, I think the on-ramp to the mythic depiction, it felt quick. It was like, what? I don't know if it was, Wright's looking at it as, I don't need to hit people over the head with this. I don't need to be as explicit. Like, I can just let the audience connect the dots, but at the same time, it's like there's, we talk about bridging the gap, right? And I've used this example before, but stand-up comedy, you want to go from setup to payoff, or you want to go from setup to punchline, and there's a gap in there, and you have to connect the dots for the audience so that the punchline or the payoff makes sense. And it's like, I don't know. I think they could have been a little more intentional. I don't want to say intentional. I hate that word, but it's true. It's like they put a little more thought into the execution of that transformation. Is it the scene where he talks to Big Bro and Big Bro's like, yeah, Providence or whatever, you won't hear about this on the news because it's controlled by the network, and the network doesn't want you to know that there was this fallout and people got sick and cancer and blah, blah, blah. And so, like, is that the turning point for Ben Richards? Probably. And then it's just like, I don't know. What makes an audience en masse gravitate towards a personality or a figure? Still trying to figure that out. But it's almost like, how does a video go viral? Sometimes you just don't. Like, why was 6'7" so fucking popular? Why the fuck was that so popular? There were like Christmas tree ornaments, T-shirts. Like, what? So I don't know. I guess maybe that's where I struggle, is like, so all of a sudden he's just like this, and I understand maybe they needed to make a bigger deal. They kind of mention it in passing, and maybe they needed to put more of a spotlight on it, where it's like, no other contestant in the history of the, like they didn't put enough emphasis on the right syllable, as it were. It was just like no other contestant has ever gone this far. It's like I feel like they should have built that up more, or at least placed a little more emphasis on it to get the audience to appreciate the weight of what's going on and the importance of it. It just feels like it kind of glossed over it. As far as the relationship with his wife, I don't know. I just didn't necessarily. My initial knee-jerk reaction was like, I don't buy this relationship. I don't buy it. Like what? I don't see them as a couple, and I don't know that they did much in the way of changing my perspective or outlook on that relationship. Like sometimes I don't know if it was a chemistry thing. It kind of settled in for me, and I was like, okay, I eventually accept it, but I still don't believe in it. It was one of those things where it just felt it could have been better. It just felt like you have Glen Powell, and then you have an actress that is probably not as well known, who did her best, and wasn't awful, but it's like, could we have done better with a different actress there? I'm trying to think of an actress that would work in that instance, but someone who it just felt very not flat, but just kind of Glen Powell's playing it in a way that there's it feels organic, natural, and then it just feels like the wife was just hitting like, all right, hit this beat, hit this beat, hit this beat, hit this beat. It was just kind of not mechanical in nature, but it didn't. I don't know. I didn't buy their relationship, but they Wright did some great things in terms of reiterating the stakes, doing callbacks like I like the little tokens and objects that symbolized why he's doing this, kind of like a reiteration of the motivation for Ben Richards, like the kid's sock. Like I thought that was a nice touch. But in terms of like, that's what was able to at least not cement, but strengthen his call to action, strengthen his motivations down the stretch, is like the little things like that. Whereas like the actual conversation, dialogue between them, and like it just didn't feel like, oh man, he would go to any length to save this woman and this child. I don't know. Feels like they could have gone a different route with that. Just felt like we've seen this before. How do we make this character pop a little bit better? Dan Killian, The Banality of Evil. So Josh Brolin's Dan Killian is a producer focused on corporate amorality, viewing life as a spreadsheet, contrasting with Richard Dawson's Damon Killian. I didn't. His motivation is strictly ratings and shareholder value, not sadism. His bureaucratic cruelty, faking, Richard's family's death, is solely designed to provoke a ratings-boosting reaction for the season finale. This portrays evil as a systemic pursuit of profit rather than the work of a mustache-twirling villain. And I really liked Josh Brolin in this role. I think Brolin played it well. There was a shot where like he is going face to face with Glen Powell, and I thought that was it was almost like those, UFC or boxing graphics, whereas you see the tail, not the tail of tape, but like at the weigh-in or something. Like it just felt like, Josh Brolin can play a villain extremely well. So I think they did a great job casting that, and he played it really well. I can't tell you how like how much bureaucracy drives me nuts. So, and having worked in the media and entertainment industries and seen firsthand, 20 years of bureaucracy, it's like not a whole lot has changed. And so that hit a chord and a note for me that's like, here's this guy that is just viewing everything as a business move. It can get a little maddening. So it can boil the blood. And, I thought he played it with, there was a level of charm, charisma, arrogance. I don't think I have too many notes on him. Like his ability to turn on a dime or to morph from on air Dan Killian, where like he has to come on camera, to corporate speak Dan Killian, to okay, now I'm gonna turn the screws on Ben Richards Dan Killian. I just feel like it was a pretty good performance, and I thought he did a pretty decent job of like trying to almost serve as like the narrator for the network's motivations and for their inner workings. So Evan McCone, oh brother, the lead hunter, wore a mask projecting an impersonal, nonchalant menace. And this is where we can, I guess, get into spoilers. If you're, I wanted more McCones. I understand he's the lead hunter. I don't know. I wanted more McCones, more intrigue, mystery. That's part of the reason why you stick around to the end. That was, for me, it was like almost one of the main reasons why I'm sticking around to the end. And while I was, intrigued, is like, you got this guy, he's masked. Who's the masked man? Who's the guy behind the mask? And my brain was like, whoa, wait a second. Because in one of the earlier scenes, you have, they show Ben Richards watching all the various game shows on the Game Shows Network. One of them is like Speed the Wheel or something like that. And they show $100 bill, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is on the $100 bill. And I was like, wow, that's a nice little cool Easter egg for this movie. A nice little tip of the cap. But given that we're in this dystopian environment and world, what is the meaning we're assigning to that? Because it's like, that's a cool little nod to Arnold and the 87 film. But it's also like, wait a tick. Currency, at least United States currency, is usually features the faces of, and this goes to global currency as well, it's figures like important, prominent political figures, presidents, leaders, whatever. So they're saying that Arnold Schwarzenegger is potentially a president in this world, and is like, is it actually Arnold Schwarzenegger who is the president, or is it's Arnold as some other character in this world as president? I always thought that Arnold Schwarzenegger would make a good president as a political leader, as the governor of California, and how he came in being somewhat stubborn into that position, but then he, appointed someone who was historically aligned with the left and a Democrat or a lesbian, and like he tried to reach across the aisle, which I value that in a leader. You can't be siloed and divided. You got to reach across the aisle, and you got to collaborate and compromise sometimes, but it's for the greater good, right? So I just thought that Arnold Schwarzenegger would make for a good president. He obviously cannot be a good U.S. president because he's not U.S. born, but I just thought that was interesting. Like, okay, if it is actually Arnold Schwarzenegger on the $100 bill, that means that the United States has undergone some kind of transformation where a migrant can be U.S. president, or a non-U.S. born citizen can become president. But then we're in this dystopian landscape. So was that, I start to make the connections in my head where like, wait a second, are they saying that by repealing that law or by revising it and letting Schwarzenegger run for president and winning president, that Schwarzenegger's to blame for what's going on? I was like, I don't know if I completely vibe with that. I don't know if I agree with that. But anyway, the fact that they included Schwarzenegger on the $100 bill, I was like, that's cool. And I hope to see more of that throughout the movie. And I don't know that we necessarily did. And if we did, it was even more subtle than that, because it wasn't like it's like the shot, lingered on Schwarzenegger's face on the $100 bill. It's kind of, they just held it up. You can see it. It's a nice little quick nod. I thought they were going to do more of that throughout the film, and they kind of did, but it was much more subtle. And so because of that, I was like, okay, so they're not completely eschewing the 87 entry, right? That adaptation. Okay, I'm in. Like, obviously, this is a bit of a departure from the 87 film, but I like that they're maintaining some elements, and I thought they would continue to do it throughout the rest of the movie. And because of they showed Schwarzenegger, I was like, looking at McCone, I was like, oh my God, I think they've done something really incredible here. But the fact that I could even think this would make me think that that's why they didn't do it. I thought that Evan McCone, when he was unmasked, because this is towards the end of the movie, and Ben Richards is at the airport, he's trying to get on the plane so that he can dump the flyers all over the wealthy neighborhoods en route to Canada. McCone's standing in the, I don't know, the poop chute of the plane. I don't even know what you call that. The ramp that you go onto the plane. He's standing there with the mask on, and Ben Richards is like, all right, you want XYZ, whatever it was, take off your mask. And he's like, and McCone's like, no. And he's like, take off your mask, or this whole, I guess I'm going to blow up everyone with the C4 that he pretended that he had. I legitimately thought, oh, this is going to be, McCone is going to take off his mask, and it's going to be Patrick Schwarzenegger. I thought it was going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's son. Patrick Schwarzenegger has a similar physicality to the actor that actually plays Evan McCone. He's not the bodybuilder, beefy bodybuilder, like really muscular type like his dad, Arnold, but he still has a physicality to him. He's tall, presents as strong, but he's not just like big beefy, but he looks, Patrick Schwarzenegger, I would think, looks similar to the Evan McCone character. So I was like, oh my God, that would be humongous if they did that. I would love that. Instead, McCone takes off the mask. It's Lee Pace. Now, I know by my tone you might think I disapprove. I love Lee Pace. Like, I just watched season 3 of The Foundation. If Lee Pace is not in Foundation, I'm not as inclined to watch it. I love Lee Pace, but it also doesn't do much, as I mentioned, doesn't do much for the reveal. It's not like, oh my God. It's just like, oh, it's Lee Pace. Like, and he's scarred. Okay. So, would have been overkill if they had all the hunters in a similar vein where it's like they're all masked men, kind of like what we saw in, you saw it in the TV adaptation of Watchmen that came out in 2019 from Damon Lindelof, where it's like all the policemen are masked to anonymize, cover up their identity. And I guess that rule was being repealed or something like that. But you also see it in real life with ICE. So, yeah, kind of scary. But yeah, it would have been overkill if you had all 5 or 6 hunters masked to be truly anonymous, because it's weird that anonymous hunters, and then you have like the only one who's truly anonymous and masked is Evan McCone. The rest you can plainly see their faces. So would have been overkill if you had, like, that was part of the escalation, is like there are 5 hunters or 6 hunters, and they're all masked, but they all have like this cool look and aesthetic and are stylized and a little more fleshed out in terms of personality. I'm not going to say that like the stalkers from the 87 version were completely fleshed out and 3-dimensional, but there was some color to them, where it's like, it's absurd, but like Jim Brown as fucking Fireball, dude, that like gets the juices going for me. That's like, I dig that pro wrestling angle for sure. Jesse Ventura as, it wasn't Captain America, but it was like something along those lines, where he's like so patriotic and American. And then you have Sub-Zero, who's a friggin' a goalie on skates, but he's Asian, and it's like, whoa, I haven't seen that combination. That's cool and unique. And then Dynamo, this big old fat guy who has a great singing voice, but is also his weapon is electricity. Like it was just, obviously caricatures, but uh, they gave us more than what we got in the Hunters from this particular version. So I disagree with. I think there's the version of this where it's like, okay, you don't have to go as extreme and absurd as the '87 version went with the Stalkers, but give me something more with the Hunters than you did, because they're pretty much like Hunters 2 through 6. And is that the point? I hope not, because if you're a TV show, I'm just trying to think of it from Dan Killian's perspective. You have an electric host, right? Cole Domingo as the host is awesome, so good. You have Evan McCone, who you have really given a great degree of depth to, or a greater degree of depth than you have with any of the other Hunters. And then it's like, oh, and here are the other Hunters, and one of them has bleach blonde hair. It's like, oh, okay. Like I just feel like the characterization of the Hunters needed to be like everyone needed to be a version of McCone, like anonymous in a sense. You saw it with kind of saw it with the Beekeeper. I thought the Beekeeper did a pretty decent job of that, where it's like, if you've seen the Beekeeper, Jason Statham movie, and like the adversaries or the antagonists, kind of like the lead ups to the boss level villain, like these little the lackeys or whatever, the obstacles or challenges that Jason Statham has to go through. They're not just a generic like, all right, it's a person. They gave him some flavor. Like the when he's at the gas station, and he has that female villainous type character come, and she's like all kind of. I mean, her look was crazy. She's shooting a friggin' Gatling gun in the gas station. Like it was just cool. And even the last guy who had like I think he had an Australian accent, was kind of like I don't know. It just seemed like it painted a more compelling picture of the villains, as opposed to, oh, here's a bad guy. So was really hoping that Evan McCone would reveal his mask and it would be Patrick Schwarzenegger. And it's like, okay, maybe that doesn't land like you would hope it would land, for a lot of the reveals that we've seen throughout cinematic history. But when it's Lee Pace, you're like, oh, Lee Pace, I like that guy. It's not like, you're not clutching your pearls. And I understand that Patrick Schwarzenegger doesn't have the level of recognition that his dad does. But for Arnold Schwarzenegger fans, of which I imagine a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger fans probably watched it on streaming and didn't go to the theater. I don't know. Like I said, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger has such a strong following amongst a certain demographic where they just don't want to see his projects remade into something else that loses that Schwarzenegger essence, or whatever. So like I said, this is one of the rare adaptations or remakes or whatever of a Schwarzenegger property that I was like, all right, I think I'm down for this. I was like, I wasn't like I was completely out on it like I was with Total Recall or some of the other ones. So and I think they missed the mark there. Again, could you have had Lee Pace play another Hunter? Absolutely. But there's something cool about the idea that Arnold Schwarzenegger appears to be a president or a former president, because they're talking about new dollars. So that means the global economy, or at least the United States economy, has completely shifted away from the dollar, and they're now using the new dollar, or new bucks, or whatever it's called. And the fact that Schwarzenegger is the face of that, and then you have Evan McCone take off his mask, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's son. Like, I don't know. I just feel like that. I know that's not gonna create mass hysteria and like everyone's gonna be losing their minds over it, but it's just a nice little touch, and I feel like they missed the mark there. So I'm curious to see. I have not come across any kind of research that would indicate like, oh, this is why we went with Lee Pace, or we tried Patrick Schwarzenegger in a scheduling conflict, blah blah blah. So The key change here reveals that McCone was a former contestant who chose to become a hunter rather than die, serving as the dark reflection of Richards, because now Richards has been presented with that same opportunity once he is able to kill off all the other hunters, and McCone's the last one to go. McCone's like, yeah, they actually did. They said they wouldn't kill my family, and then they ended up killing my family. I forget, but so he was the, and I thought that was a nice, that was a nice payoff, because it was like throughout the movie there are references to this season 1 contestant. Well, the season 1 contestant is the one that went the furthest, and I don't know, maybe I feel like that could have been, because it's basically just a monologue from Lee Pace, Evan McCone's character, explaining what happened, but it was like, okay, so he wins season 1, but they still kill his family. I don't know. It was very bizarre, and you do empathize or sympathize with Evan McCone in that moment. I think Lee Pace delivered that expertly, and you feel for him, because it's like he didn't want this, and yet that's what's being presented to Ben Richards, is like, hey, we're gonna do a spin-off, and you're gonna be Hunter 6 again. Like, Edgar Wright is such a creative force and such a creative mind that it's like, but then there are moments where it's like, what happened here? Like, we're gonna call it Hunter 6, and it's just like, that's the best you can do. Like, Dan Killian, that's the best you can do? Like, this is your pitch, Hunter 6? I don't know. It just feels like it's Wright's known for being so stylish and visually compelling, and there's so much color, and the majority of this movie is painted that way, and it works. And then there are certain areas where it's like, man, they just completely dropped the ball. Glen Powell's disguise in the beginning, Evan McCone's reveal, like the package, the pitch from Dan Killian to Ben Richards, and it just feels like, man, it just needed another round of work, or someone to touch up these little scenes or beats or moments that could elevate it to an 8 or a 9 out of 10, as opposed to being a 6 or a 7. 6, 7. Ugh. His weapon being the theatrical knife of destiny. I think his gun might have fate carved on it. So destiny, fate. I thought those were cool touches. And it's like, if they, I understand you don't want to have an excessive runtime, like this podcast episode has an excessive runtime. I understand you don't want to do that. But I do feel like there's just some little touch-ups here and there where it could have really took it to the next level. You have Amelia Williams, the radicalized bystander. Amelia Jones plays Amelia Williams, an audience proxy and the film's protagonist. The 2025 film Adaptation expands Amelia's role from the book's wealthy hostage to a critique of class blindness. A pitiful scene, the scarf moment, has Richards reveal Amelia's expensive scarf costs more than his daughter's medicine. This forces Amelia to confront economic disparity, and her realization transforms her from a hostage into a participant in the resistance. The character arc symbolizes the middle class's necessary acknowledgement of the poor's realities for genuine social change. And, they decked her out in red, right? Because that's the color of the Republican Party. So I thought that was, I thought that was all done very well. And I do think Amelia Jones, I'd imagine that Edgar Wright is left-leaning Democrat, more liberal, and so that was his way of kind of taking a stab at the Republican Party. And I thought Amelia Jones played the role very well. Like, that's a situation where, could they have gotten a version of Amelia Jones adjacent to play the wife, to kind of like almost do a mirror situation, reflection, like a juxtaposition of the wife and Amelia Williams. Like, maybe that's an approach they could have taken to kind of level up that relationship between Ben and Sheila Richards. And then you have the Apostle, Bradley Throckmorton, Daniel Ezra. Like, did we know that his name was Daniel Throckmorton or whatever? Yeah, this is the Apostle. This one was this is tricky. The character Bradley, portrayed by Daniel Ezra, is updated from the novel's street level ally to the Apostle. The Apostle is an underground digital activist in the movie. The modern change reflects that resistance is now fought digitally. The Apostle broadcasts counter-propaganda videos to debunk the network's villain edit of Richards and reveal the truth. And I think that is maybe the reason why I would, like, if they had, I'm just thinking of how they could make this work a little bit better. Because, like, some of these segments from the Apostle, they run, it feels a bit lengthy, but I do think if they had done briefer segments or snippets, not necessarily reels or shorts, dear God, but something like maybe interweave him a little bit more. Like, after we're introduced to the Apostle, have little things here and there dropped in and sprinkled throughout Act 2 and Act 3, where we see people, the impoverished, the poor, the audiences, how are they discovering the Apostles' videos? Because I feel like the Apostles' videos are exposing the truth and they are counter propaganda, but like we only see it, what, twice, 3 times? Like, why not? And we only see it in his editing bay. That's one time we see it. And then the other time we see it is in the epilogue, prologue, whatever comes after the climax, that first climax, right? And it's expository, right? It serves, that's the tool and purpose it serves. But why not have that, like, cut down on the 2 segments that you have with him and sprinkle throughout to show, like, that to me would help aid the transformative arc for Ben Richards. Meaning, how does he go from a poor nobody with anger issues who only cares about his family to this mythical figurehead leader of a revolutionary movement? I think the way he does it, because he can no longer do it through these videotapes that he has to send in every day. Remember, he has to send in a videotape every day for however long, 30 days. And like, we've seen that the network is deep faking, editing it to make him look like a bad guy. So why don't we see more of the Apostle videos being watched and consumed by this by the underground, this movement? And I feel like that would help the movie-going audience, the viewing audience of the movie, buy in more to this transformation to Richard's lives. That's how I think you could have taken this movie to the next level. The Apostle is a tool, right? His videos are serving as the reality check, the truth behind what's going on behind the scenes of the network, their true motivations. Why not have that? Like, it's like Wright was operating under the assumption that, well, duh, people are watching the Apostle, but it's just that wasn't necessarily clear. Like, is there the scene where Ben Richards is on the run? Well, he's on the run the whole movie, but when he's in like the forest, I think he's in Maine or about to approach Maine, and he comes across like this kind of makeshift outdoor movie theater drive-in experience, but it's like people sitting on tree stumps watching a huge projected screen. Like, were they watching the Apostles videos during that? I forget, but it's like, I don't know. It just needed to be a little more prevalent. Doesn't have to be much. Just can be a little minute here, a little minute there, less than 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds, like intercut, interwoven, just so you can see. It helps drive the escalation from in Ben Richards' arc, in my opinion. Because the 2 segments that they showed with the Apostles videos, it felt soup. I don't know. It was edited, and I imagine, and I was thinking this, like, I think it was edited in a way so that to um counteract or counterbalance how long they were. Like, if you could have broken up those two Apostle videos and kind of left cliffhangers and then, kind of intercut at various important plot points, I think it would have driven the message home a lot more than we're going to show you this 3-minute like frenetic video from the Apostle at this point and at this point. I think if they had cut it up, diced it up a little bit more and interwoven and interspersed, it would have it would have helped to drive that escalating tension. The Americanos parody is so funny. I thought it was funny. I think a lot of people are like, well, that's kind of low hanging fruit. It's been done before, but I mean, the Kardashians. I mean, are you ever going? That is like the symbol of reality TV and how insane the class disparity and class gap can get. That they are just like in dire straits and in tears and demoralized because someone wore their shoes to a party, exclusive party. It's like, okay, and people like this. All right. So the show features a wealthy, vapid family, all with A names, which I thought was funny. Amore, played by Demi Mazar, who is a very underrated actress. I don't know if underrated is the word, but she just always knocks it out of the park. She's so awesome. Ariane, played by Kat Cohen. Adriane, played by Emma Seedy, and Antone, played by Noah Ritter. I just, I don't know. I like that because I think Edgar Wright was like, yeah, I want to be faithful to the novel, but we don't want to be completely humorless in all this. Like, we want to make sure that there's humor throughout, and we're not just we're not forcing the humor. And I thought that was pretty cool. Apparently Edgar Wright contacted the actual production team of the Kardashians to learn their specific camera setups and editing techniques, ensuring the parody looked indistinguishable from the real thing. And I think job well done. There was critical backlash. It was intended to show the brain rot used to pacify the masses. Many critics felt the satire was toothless and dated, lacks the biting edge of the rest of the film. Yeah, I mean, and hey, I can understand that criticism because, you would think that in this world, in this version of the future, we would have moved beyond the Kardashians, right? Like that kind of style of reality TV would have worked in 2005. But in a world where we have Speed the Wheel and The Running Man, these like death games, are people still going to be tuning into that style of reality TV? And I don't know, man. I mean, it's 2026 now, and people still love watching shit like Below Deck or reality TV on Bravo. It's like it still resonates, and I don't know that it's necessarily changed that much. Although with a show like Traitors, where it's pinning the villain archetypes from every reality TV program and pitting them against each other in a competition, it's like maybe it is escalating, but it's not nowhere near what we see with Speed the Wheel and The Running Man. So that's why it does feel like, and maybe that's the commentary on reality TV, is like there's still gonna be that avenue, right? That approach, that format, where it's just vapid, like rich people complaining about how rich they are. Like, is that ever gonna change? Maybe not. Speed the Wheel. This was a grim game show featured towards the beginning of the movie, hosted by a cameo, hosted by Sean Hayes. Cameo from Sean Hayes, which, perfection, dude. Great casting. I love Sean Hayes. I listen to Smart List, the podcast. He's just a funny dude. And I don't know that they could have gotten a better host for that. So the casting was, for the most part, pretty awesome. Like, love Josh Brolin, love Cole Domingo, the Running Man host. I love Sean Hayes, the Speed the Wheel host. It's just, it feels like they ran up against the wall in terms of budget. And I think that's what, ultimately, Wright has to make some decisions, right? It can't be, well, pie in the sky. Ideally, I want to check all these boxes, but I only have this amount of budget, and we'll let these other areas suffer because the other parts will compensate. And I don't know that they did. So in the Speed the Wheel segment, that's where you see the $100 bill with Arnold Schwarzenegger. In this segment, an overweight contestant is forced to run in a giant hamster wheel while answering trivia questions, and failure results in death. The segment highlights the cruelty of the spectacle. The audience laughs at the contestants' physical struggle, desensitized to their humanity. There's also this liquid death paradox, the prominent product placement of liquid death water. Liquid Death is a brand that satirizes marketing itself, selling water in beer cans with heavy metal aesthetics. Placing it in dystopian film about corporate saturation could be read as a brilliant meta joke, a brand that fits perfectly into the idiocracy of the future. Okay. However, critics and audiences were divided. Some found the distracting shoutouts to the brand, along with Monster Energy, to be manufactured. Pulling them out of the narrative raises the question, is it satire if the studio is getting paid for it? You look at what made RoboCop so enjoyable was the satire of commercials. And, not only news, but commercials, TV in general, media in general, sprinkled throughout. Where it's like, I'd buy that for $1. And you have to wear sunscreen lotion that's like 3,000 SPF because the ozone has depleted so much that ultraviolet rays are at like crazy high levels. If you want to go outside, you have to put on this like ridiculous sunscreen. Like stuff like that makes sense because it's satirizing what the future of media would look like. This is like a real life products that I can understand why the studio would want to pursue that, or why the brands would be interested, because there isn't a good, I used to work on that side of the business in ad sales and marketing services, sponsorships, brand integration, all that stuff. And it felt right in terms of brand alignment, but that's goes against what I think the message of the movie was trying to convey. So I didn't mind the liquid death incorporation. The Monster Energy one did feel weird and off. So I will say that. But I mean, if you're thinking in terms of, if you were to redo this movie and you were like, all right, we need to draw a line in the sand here. And even though it completely makes sense for something like Liquid Death or Monster Energy to be a part of this movie, we need to make an active decision to go against that and to satirize. Because a TV show of this nature, they're not going to, despite the success of all these streaming services without ads, what did they do? They introduced ads so they could lower the price point and increase their subscribership or viewership. So a TV show like this, even though it's state controlled or whatever, and is basically the only thing available to you, Dan Killian's going to squeeze every last dollar out of this TV show. And so I think that they would have been better served and to include fictitious brands and have that sponsorship be all over the goddamn place, because we're already encountering that now, where you look at like NBA uniforms, MLB uniforms, NFL is now going down that road where it's like they have the patch on the sleeve on baseball unis. You have the patch on the NBA jersey, like, and at NASCAR, Jesus Christ. So, you can see it happening in sports, and I think you can see it happening with TV shows. So I think that's the right approach. You need that. And what I would have done a little bit differently, I mean, they kind of did with Liquid Death, was like, if we're going to do this, let's partner with brands who get the joke. Liquid Death gets it. Monster Energy probably gets it. But let's subvert it in a way so that it's not so pro that brand and make people question whether it's legitimate product placement. That's the avenue I would have gone down. But instead, they just played it kind of straight. Not so much with Liquid Death, but it was like, let's just make people question whether or not they paid for it. There was no question in this sense. It was like, oh, okay, Liquid Death product placement, Monster Energy product placement. We also have the Night Witch. A subtle but potent detail is the network's branding of Sheila Richards as a night witch, which I don't remember them calling her that. But the term is drawn from Dinka culture, referring to a relentless spirit or curse. By applying this label to a grieving mother, the network weaponizes folklore to dehumanize her, turning a victim of their system into a monster to be feared by the public. You know, that's an interesting point. I did not feel that at all throughout the. I mean, I know they tried to vilify her, and basically were calling her like implying that she's a prostitute or a slut, a whore, pay for play type of thing. They did touch on that. This whole night witch folklore, I didn't pick up on that at all. So I would have liked, you know, I mean, when you say that Sheila Richards in this movie is supposed to be a relentless spirit or curse, did that come through? I don't think for a majority of the viewing audience that ever came through, but someone made the connection there, and it's like maybe they should have leaned into that a little bit more. FreeVee and the NCG, so the network's distribution platform is named FreeVee. This is a double-edged joke referencing the concept of free TV, which is pacification, but also nods to the real-world ad-supported streaming service formerly IMDb TV, owned by Amazon. Suggests a future where all content is free because the viewer is the product, meaning like it's not necessarily a one-way viewer viewing the content. I believe the TV screens or the screens are equipped with I want to say cameras or something where they're able to monitor and basically just collect a bajillion data points so that they can tailor their advertising, their marketing, and get you to buy things that you probably don't need. So there's that shot at Amazon with FreeVee, because I was like, oh shit, FreeVee? Like Amazon, IMDb TV, that's the thing that people are tuning into. And then I guess towards the beginning, when you see Ben Richards walking through the dystopian setting, going from like the poor side of town into the closer to where the network is located, and it's a little more upscale and wealthy and luxurious, you get to see the tower in the background, and there's a big giant red N on top of it. It's like that's Edgar Wright taking a shot, I believe, at Netflix. So it's just funny because it's like, this movie was released in theaters, and obviously Edgar Wright, probably pro movie theater. You know, there was, I'm sure he had some kind of discussions with Amazon and Netflix, and they were like, we would love to have this exclusively on our platform. And he was like, cool, can I release it in theaters? And they're like, no. And he's like, well, fuck you. Or they said yes, and they were like, we'll give it maybe a month in theaters. And Edgar Wright's like, no, I don't want less than a month in theaters. I don't want 2 or 3 weeks and we're out. I want a 2 to 3 month run, you know? And that's probably where he, wanted to include these little shots at Netflix and Amazon. And then the irony, of course, being that it, by box office standards, flopped and was a box office bomb, did not perform well in theaters, and then it goes to streaming, and look at it perform. It does well. So what does this mean for mid-tier budget theatrical releases? It's going to be tough, and Running Man does not support the argument to release it in theaters. It supports the argument, or if you do release it in theaters, why release it for 2-3 months? Because the theaters are also part of this equation, where it's like, wait, dude, we can't keep this in theaters. No one's going. We're losing money. So interesting battle to be waged. And there have been a lot of instances where Netflix releases something or Prime Video releases something direct to streaming and not in theaters, and people are like, why wasn't this released in theaters? So just, I wonder what Edgar Wright thinks about it. Like, well, I'm glad we found our audience. It's probably the PC PR approved reaction to it excelling on streaming and not doing well in theaters when it was taking shot at streamers. The Network Community Guard, the NCG, The privatized police force reinforces the theme that the state and the corporation have merged. The police do not serve the law; they serve the copyright holder. Yeah. So, kind of shades of that. You can make a connection to what's happening in real life. I'm sure Edgar Wright was, that might have been an inspiration, whether it was subconscious. Was he subconsciously thinking that? There should be ties to ice and what's happening there. So this movie raises a lot of great questions, and it gets the conversation going. And it's sad that it flopped at the box office, because I would like to see more like this. If you tweaked it and modified this to a certain extent, I think it could really, and you can see with its success on streaming, there's an appetite for it. It's just, how is it presented? Was the marketing off? Was it, this is an action movie for your Schwarzenegger fans, or is it a socio-political satire for the novel fans? Like, it's maybe just try to be everything to everyone and stuck with no one. But then you make it available in streaming and get some buzz and word of mouth. So it's a slow burn. I mean, it's almost similar to what happened with the 87 release, if you think about it, where it's like, I don't know that did tremendous box office, but it got a cult following as it went to VHS and then to cable, especially cable. So, yeah. Let's see here. All right, let's talk about the endings. So the most significant deviation from the novel is the ending. In the book, Richards flies a plane into the network tower, killing himself and Killian in a suicide attack. This ending defines the book's nihilism. There is no escape, only destruction. And then we have the 9/11 problem. Edgar Wright and co-writer Michael Bacall acknowledged that filming a protagonist flying a passenger jet into a skyscraper was impossible in a post-9/11 world. Audiences would likely recoil from the imagery, seeing Richards not as a hero, but as a terrorist, which is exactly what the network wants him to. That's what they painted him as in the movie. I don't know if that happened in the novel, but the network was trying to set him up as this dangerous terrorist type. And they were like, if you don't agree to this, this spinoff, we're going to run this package that makes you look like the terrorist that we've been painting you as. So, instead of the suicide crash, the film opts for the survival narrative. Richards is on the plane, intends to crash it. However, the plane is shot down and intercepted. Richards survives via cockpit ejection system. And reunites with his family, who were not killed but hidden, and joins the resistance. The film replaces the philosophy of obliteration with the philosophy of inspiration. By surviving, Richards validates that Richards lives graffiti. He becomes a living symbol of the revolution rather than a martyr. Film ends with the implication that the network will not fall, not because of a bomb, but because the people have woken up. The change was divisive. Purists argue that this Disney-fies the story, removing the stark, uncompromising tragedy that made the book unique. It aligns the film closer to the 1987 Hollywood happy ending that Wright might care to admit. Others argue that in 2025, a story about a suicide bomber isn't the hero's journey audiences want or need. A story about dismantling the system and surviving it offers a more constructive political message, and I agree. I do agree. Like, we've spent this almost 2 hours of, walking the audience through this transformative arc for Ben Richards from angry, isolated, apathetic for all things except his family, to someone who has embraced the movement and wants revolution. But it's like, did you put, and I understand thinking that your family is dead sends you back and resets you and reverts you back to the apathetic, cynical, angry person. So that makes sense. I get it. And there's kind of some ties to No Time to Die, the last James Bond film that Daniel Craig was in. The ending kind of mirrors that decision, where it's like, I don't know, No Time to Die. That was a tough ending. I mean, I don't completely disagree with it, but it was like, God damn, we built up all that to get to the point where it all comes together, and then I'm just gonna, all right, that's the way we're gonna go. All right. So yeah, like, for him to go through all this and to crash the plane into the tower that just like confirms that, yeah, the network was right. He was a terrorist. So let's take a look at the forensics. The flop that streamed. Box office autopsy. Despite a $110 million budget and a star-studded cast, The Running Man grossed only $69 million worldwide. Giggity. Marketing struggled to define the film. Like we said, was it an action movie, a satire, horror thriller? Confusion alienated casual audiences. Curse of the mid-budget. In the current theatrical landscape, films that are not massive IP intellectual property events like Marvel or Avatar struggle to draw audiences. The Running Man occupied an awkward middle ground, too expensive to be indie, too weird to be a four-quadrant blockbuster. It faced stiff competition from other releases, including Now You See Me 3. Dear God, people love that freaking franchise, and I don't get it. I saw the first one, I was like, all right, I don't need to see any more of that. And yet, they keep coming back for more. So people just fucking love magic. It's like in-person magic where you're live at the show and you see it happen. I understand the appeal there. Watching a movie about magic is like crazy. Yeah, I agree. And this is this is an IP. It's just a very old IP. We're talking almost 40 years old, this IP is, and there hasn't been much in the way of continuing that IP since the 87 movie. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, oh, we got a Running Man in the 90s, we got a Running Man in the 2000s and the 2010s. There just hasn't been, trying to like almost revive or rejuvenate an IP that wasn't necessarily, it's a cult classic. I appreciate the campiness of the Running Man 87, I definitely think that's a world that I would like to see built out and explored. But that's me. I'm in my 40s, mid 40s. I'd imagine that, for a greater degree of people, and this is probably why Predator Badlands performs so well, because that, again, is an IP that has been established and has proven to be popular. And it's gone through its ups and downs as a franchise. But it's not like, it's almost like if you had released Predator in 87 theatrically, and then you didn't have another Predator movie until Predator Badlands. How would Predator Badlands have been? Would Predator Badlands have performed as well if we didn't have Killer of Killers streaming on Hulu, or Prey streaming on Hulu, or, the other films that kind of pump new life into it? It's kind of had that presence throughout. Running Man hasn't had the kind of cultural presence and has been kind of absent from the public eye, or at least online, for a pretty long time. There's only I think there's a tremendous amount of potential for the franchise, but after this performance, I don't know if you have to reboot it, or if it's just like, let's just let sleeping dogs lie. Well, who knows? Like Family Guy was canceled after season 1 or 2 in 99 or 2000. Had a successful run on DVD, and then came back to the airwaves. So is that something that The Running Man can pull off if it performs well enough in streaming? I doubt it, but there's a lot to play with there. It's a cool world, and they could make it cooler. It almost feels like, could this be a prequel? I doubt it. Again, I doubt it, but it would be cool. And who knows, maybe, if Lee Pace ends up, I don't know. I was going to say, if Lee Pace ends up being this like next level blockbuster A-list name for whatever reason, people will revisit The Running Man and be like, oh, it's a great reveal. But it's, for that reveal to work, I said the same thing about the Rebecca Ferguson reveal. Like, for that reveal to work, it has to be someone that is just like, you didn't see coming, who wasn't mentioned in any of the marketing, does not have a credit on IMDb on the movie. Like, no one knew that they were going to be participating in this movie. They have instant recognition, meaning like people know when they see that face, they know the name, and that aligns with, it's a fit for the movie. Patrick Schwarzenegger, but whatever. Following the theatrical disappointment, the film found massive success on VOD and streaming platforms like Apple TV and Paramount Plus. That's where I watched it. I watched it on Paramount Plus. So I saw this in the theater in early November, mid-November. And I remember being disappointed and losing interest towards the midpoint, towards the end of the second act. I was just like, this is just lost all gas for me. Like after that sequence in Michael Cera's home, which is like Home Alone on steroids, like that was a crazy awesome sequence. After that ends, and then he drives his car on the bridge. He drives the dune buggy into the villain and jumps out of the dune buggy. That was very Fast and Furious, like jumping out of the dune buggy, like over the bridge guardrail into the water. I was like, that's awesome. And then it just lost. From that point on, it kind of lost its momentum and juice. And I was like, I kind of don't like where this is heading. Like I said, I think Amelia Jones as Amelia Williams, good performance. Was that sequence too long? Could they have heightened that somehow? Which they did try and do, where they run into various obstacles. But it's like, I don't know, man. If the network if we already know that Ben Richards knows the network's not going to kill him, there's no stakes. I think that's where I lost it. And like, he's no longer angry at all. You can be like, we're talking about, this is less than 30 days or 30 days. Like you're going to go from, you're blowing your top in every interaction just about, to now I don't know. There's a profound irony in The Running Man, a movie about the dangers of being glued to screens. Finding its true audience in the living room suggests that the film works better as a streamed event than a theatrical one. Perhaps because the satire of watching a game show hits harder when viewed on the same device one uses to watch reality TV. You look at, it finished second in its opening weekend with $16 million domestically, behind Now You See Me, Now You Don't. God damn it. And it finished fifth in the month of November 2025 at the box office with $34 million. It fell to 19th in December 2025 with only $3.5 million, behind movies like Ella McKay, which has been panned universally. Domestically finished in 54th place in 2025, behind The Monkey, The Amateur, Mickey 17, The Naked Gun, The Housemaid, Ballerina, and The Accountant 2. Worldwide, it finished 60th, behind A Working Man, Materialists, and Anaconda in 2025. So, in terms of major box office flops in 2025, the ones that had the highest absolute losses, published as loss estimates, this is marketing plus splits plus ancillaries, not just budgets versus gross. Tron Ares had a projected loss of $133 million, according to a report from Deadline. Snow White, Disney's live-action movie, had an estimated loss of $115 million. And Mickey 17 had a projected loss of $75 to $80 million, according to Variety. So, it's got a 6.4 to 10 on IMDb. I gave it a 6. I think I'm pretty much in line with that. I'm tempted. You could persuade me to make it a 7. You could do that. And I think with the adjustments that I suggested, it could move to the 7 or 8 territory. Reviewers say The Running Man is lauded for its action performances and adherence to the novel, explores themes of class divide, media manipulation, and corporate greed. Critics highlight issues with pacing, a weak final act, and shallow character development. Some find it lengthy and convoluted, while others appreciate its satire and relevance. Glen Powell's performance is generally praised, though some note a lack of emotional depth. On Rotten Tomatoes, 63% of all critics gave it a barely fresh rating, while 51% of total critics gave it a technically rotten rating. Critics' consensus is spiritedly sprinting through grim source material. Edgar Wright's The Running Man doesn't live up to the director's high bar for inventive action extravaganzas, but maintains a slick stride. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if you do get another director in place of Edgar Wright, who is known for more grim, like a Fincher. There might be some better directors who are more suited for this. Like, people either wanted grim or stylish? And how do you do grim and stylish? So maybe there was a better director to helm this. So they have that sequence where the apostle is basically breaking down the archetypes of the three contestants. Like, here's the guy who gets too cocky, or the guy who is just like the Hurley kid is the easy mark, basically. Like he's not trying, or he just gives himself up too easily. Right? He's not being smart. So that made sense. And it was like, I think ironically, people probably clapped when Hurley was was shot. It was like it really leans into like, oh man, like when you position the character like that, you are now feeding into what you're trying to fight against, aren't you? Anyway, in the Apostles video, it's like, okay, so Hurley kid, that's the archetype number 1. Archetype 2 is the one who's like doesn't give a fuck, right? It was actively like throwing caution in the wind, and is just like, fuck it, like you only live once type of attitude and mentality. I'm gonna go out, and I'm gonna go out in a blaze of glory. I'm gonna go to a strip club. I'm gonna spend money. I'm gonna do shots, and like I'm just gonna live life to the fullest because I know my time is coming to an end quickly. I was hoping that they would subvert archetype number 2. So in that sequence where the lesbian contestant is at the casino, and she's got that cool outfit, the cowboy outfit, and she's gambling, and she's basically falling in line with everything that the apostle predicted based on archetypes. She ends up escaping from the casino. Like, it's a lot of close calls. She then gets in this car. She peels out. It's a cool car. She's in a cool outfit. She says something cool. She peels out, and it's like the audience thinks, oh my God, she has defied the odds. She has gone against what the archetype is, and she's going to prove that she's different. And then they cut to in studio with Cole Domingo, and he's like, with these 2 kids with flamethrowers. And it's just like, but even though we didn't catch her death on screen, we have these 2 young men to thank. And it's like 2 boys that are like prepubescent or tweens with flamethrowers. And they show a little quick clip of like even though our hunters were unable to hunt this contestant down, these 2 kids, we have these 2 to thank. And they show a little clip, and I'm thinking, oh, that's a deep fake. Like, they have staged this to make the audience think that they've killed contestant number 2. But we're going to see down the stretch in the final act that contestant's going to come back and save the day, dude. I thought that would be the cool twist, is like, while we're so honed in and focused in on Ben Richards as the protagonist and him as a one-man army, wouldn't it be fucking cool if this second contestant shocks the world? Everyone thinks she's dead. The network has zero idea where she is, where she's figured out how to, like, we thought she was playing into this archetype of like, well, fuck it, I don't give a fuck, YOLO. But really, she's been very strategic and intelligent about everything that's going on, and she ends up coming back and saving Ben Richards. God damn. Let me make this movie. Like, erase this movie, keep the skeleton, let me have a crack at it. I was hoping that would have been the case, and instead it's just like, oh, she really did die. Like, she really did die. Like, they couldn't have done a little teaser at the end where it's like, I don't know. So again, a missed opportunity, I feel like. 78% of verified audience members gave it a 3.9 out of 5. I gave it a fresh rating with an average rating of 3.9 out of 5. 72% of all audience members gave it a positive review, averaging a 3.8 out of 5 rating. So a little bit higher from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes than you see on IMDb, because that would roughly translate to a 7 or 8 on IMDb. So yeah, that's why I'm not hard set on a 6.4 out of 10. I think you could make the argument that it's closer to a 7. But again, it's just like, really let you down in the final second half of the second act and the final act. The Running Man, though a bit of the source material's thematic heft is softened here, The Running Man still delivers a high-octane, gripping ride supercharged by Glen Powell's irresistible charisma. So I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a 7 of 10 on IMDb. So yeah, maybe I should update it to a 7. Metacritic assigned the film a score of 56 out of 100. Audience poll by CinemaScore gave it an average grade of B plus on an A plus to F scale, the same as the original film, and a definite recommend score of 58%. Would I recommend it to you? Well, oh my God. I mean, if you have read the novel, if you have seen the 87 movie with Schwarzenegger, I think you do. It is a recommend from me. Just don't get your hopes up too much. Just enjoy it for what it is. That, we probably won't see another Running Man movie for quite some time. However, what I could foresee happening is a Running Man TV show. Oh my God. The one thing that I think its creators or Stephen King, Richard Bachman, was maybe trying to go against is now going to happen. Like the Running Man TV series streamed on Netflix. Oh, that would be so funny. But no, it'd probably be a Paramount Plus streaming TV series, which I think they could execute very well, because you just don't have the budget to really pull it off for a box office event, but you do make it a really compelling TV show that's scales back but is more focused on the more intricate plot lines of class divide and stuff like that. I think there's an avenue for that. Yes, so that's the episode. The next movie review that is coming down the pipeline is Predator: Badlands. Came out theatrically right around the same time as Running Man, but had a much longer run at the box office, and just premiered on Disney Plus and Hulu this past week. And I rewatched it, took some really great notes, and I'm excited to talk about that because, whereas Running Man feels like its theatrical movie future is in question and probably dunzo, or has met a dead end for the time being, Predator: Badlands, in concert, in combination with Prey, Killer of Killers, and now Alien Earth, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think that IP and franchise is not like skyrocketing, but it is steadily inclining and improving and growing. And I have a lot of confidence if they stick with a guy like Dan Trachtenberg to see it through and make it something that can build into something larger. Not quite the same returns as like an MCU project, but I think there's a nice little, I like the world he's building. So that'll be the next movie review. So that's it for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will talk to you next time. Adios, muchachos.